And that's why you just have to aim for the center of visible mass and hope you actually hit something. And 9 times out of 10, and again, with a pistol, for example, the barrel's this long. One slight movement of your hand will move the barrel maybe half a degree. At 100 yards, that half a degree is a couple of feet, which is off your target. Don't check the math because I kind of made that up as I went along.
At this point, no. Please say
any specific questions or anything they want to specifically ask?
What anime magazine would you say actually depicted the villain very way that was realistic or at least somewhat less unrealistic than everyone else?
I'm not a huge expert on the animes myself. It's hard to say. I mean, again, too, you can pick specific technical things, like we just mentioned a couple right there. One of the other ones that, again, you know, don't let facts get in the way of a good story. Shakespeare said that. So you know, you got to realize that when in an anime or a manga, their specific point is they want to entertain the reader or the viewer. They want to say, okay, so this is a great story, and have a great time, and it's like, oh, it's awesome. He's got, you know, all those great lines. You know, it's when the heroes come in and they save the day. Well, some of that isn't very realistic, but then again, if they did it perfectly realistic, it would be a boring story. So that's some of the big facts.
Zipang is doing a pretty good job on that.
Realistic, one movie with some very realistic scenes is Flight of the Honey's.
Wings. Wings of Honey.
Oh, Wings on the Ice.
Wings. It's basically the first space flight.
Yeah.
There's 2 warring nations left on the planet. One of them makes an effort to actually put a man into space. And all they're choosing.
Wings of Honey.
Thank you. It's been years since I've seen this one, but whoever did the animation for the aerial combat and the ground attack from an aerial view obviously had spent a lot of time looking at gun camera footage taken from Vietnam. You don't get to fire a small 2.75-inch rocket, 68 millimeter. You do not get a massive explosion that will have one hotel. You get a small explosion, a little bit of dust, if you're unfortunately in the area. A lot of whistling shrapnel life. But
Yeah, there's another anime that depicts aerial combat fairly accurately. The rest of it's pretty interesting as well. It's called Skyfall. And in between the aerial combat, which are very technically, very well done. It paused, so it's actually fairly realistic in that way too. You may want to check that out and see.
I'd also say that the recommendation is the works of Ryosuke Takahashi and Gasaraki Life, because while those are giant robot series, and giant robot series are kind of the fate of military realism,
That's like actual armored engagements in the other.
yeah. The idea is that they sort of treat it as, well, how would this work from a logistical perspective? Flag in particular has a few episodes devoted to those several hundred people in the background, as they have like a couple of episodes devoted entirely to this is a problem with how this machine works, how we fix it, and it actually tries to explore that semi-coherently. That's Gasaraki and Flag was like a series of it afterwards.
that's something, armored combat, tank on tank. Most tanks, and if you look back at the footage from the Iraq War, the Gulf Wars, a lot of the tanks, when they were hit, there was no big explosion, unless the magazine moved into the tank was hit. It's pathetic reality. If you get high enough, you're in the right spot, the ground basically go in, shatter, and think about putting pebbles in a can, dropping a mouse as a victim, close it up, shake it, pinch it, close out the.
So you'll find one of the rounds that a tank will use against another tank is called a heat round, high explosive anti-tank round. and what it does is it actually burns a hole through the tank using a copper jet process. And then the inside layer of the tank's armor will peel away into little pieces, and that's what kills the crew. And when you want to stop a tank, that's primarily what you're trying to do. And as he mentioned, if you're lucky enough, or lucky, it could conceivably happen that all the rounds that the tank itself is holding will, because of the heat or whatever, cook off, and then you'll see that dramatic explosion of the turret coming off. But it's quite rare, fairly rare. Generally, what you'll find is that's a dead tank, and there'll be a hole in it, or it'll have its tracks blown off, and therefore can no longer move, and therefore is no longer an issue.
Crews run away because we're surrounded by the enemy, except behind us. Let's go. The tank's not moving.
Tank's a great target. Everybody likes shooting at tanks. Airplanes like shooting at tanks. Soldiers like shooting at tanks. Even the Navy likes shooting at tanks. So when you're in a tank, you're a target, and it's never nice to be a target.
The way to tell, as you were saying, tell how the tanks were killed is by or for the damage. One fellow said, I can tell when a tank had been killed by infantry and looked like the air. In other words, it was full of holes. Everybody opened up on this poor vehicle, and the guys inside. From all sides of the tank weapons. Probably the first two were what were required to take the vehicle out of action. The rest was just people were giving a massive grade.
Yeah, just going back to the Second World War, a number of occasions that people would run across a dead tank or something like that. They would just throw another round into it just to see if somebody was wrong.
Yes.
And as they say, just knocking it over. Somebody hiding there, you're dead now.
Historically, that was done because the German military was very skilled at ambush and the use of field expedient shelter. Field expedient positions.
And my thing with the Coast, when I was in the Coast Guard, I was a deckhand for a year, and then I was a radarman after I got schooled. And we would do, we would have an old the rolling sink, the target practice, so the, gunnermen can practice. We had different types of weapon, anti-aircraft, all sorts of things. And as somebody new, not seeing guns or anything, like blowing things up, you're expecting these big explosions and stuff. I'm like, well, did they hit it? I know they shot something at it. Did they hit? And nothing really happens. And then they start to get the littler guns and then the big guns and that sort of thing. So it really doesn't happen as wonderfully and awesome as everybody expects. But you can go over there, yeah, we did sink it. But it wasn't that big explosion. So they kept shooting it more and more and more until they get something. But it's not as big as it and wonderful as the anime makes it.
Question over there?
Just a point for me. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan. The first one was a combat tour in 108. And we worked with UAVs. And one of the things you learn very quickly is weapons are actually far less lethal than fiction. It's one of those truth is stranger than fiction. You can drop a 500-pound bomb on someone that lands 5 feet from them. And because of the micro-terrain, because of the effects of terrain, when something explodes, shrapnel doesn't actually go out. It's not like a kill zone. It actually expands out, in kind of a fan. And you can have someone standing right next to the bomb, survive the blast. He may be really messed up, but he'll take off in a run because adrenaline kicks in, and off he goes to the next village. And some guy 50 meters away will take his firing piece and off his goes his head. And it's the kind of thing that if it happened in like a video game we were playing, you shoot someone, nothing happens to them, the bullet goes right through them because it doesn't tumble enough, it doesn't hit anything vital. You'd be like, hacks, what's he doing? But in real life it happens all the time. Weapons do not. And then sometimes you get weapon effects and everybody falls down. You fire a single hellfire and everybody, 10 guys you're shooting at, all of them gone. So it can be extremely unpredictable.
Yeah, very unpredictable. A lot of random effects are occurring. And again, like for example, pistol rounds. People will talk about how this pistol round, like the 45, is so much better than the 9mm, which is so much better than this. Like if I could pick my target, I can shoot at you with a 22 caliber pistol. I put it through your head, you're dead. I can shoot at you with a 45 or a 9mm, I can hit you 6 times, and I hit you in the legs, and you'll probably punch me. You're just really angry. Where you hit your target is far more important than what you hit them with. And there's always all sorts of random effects and things as simple as how the bullet moves, how it tumbles, how it spirals, or even the atmosphere can affect whether or not it's going to be lethal or non-lethal. Do we have another question over there somewhere?
Yes, well, sometimes a lack of military can be just as unrealistic as how the military is portrayed. Like, for instance, once I watched the movie adaptation of the old anime, Tetsujin 28, and there was a giant robot attacking the city, but the military was nowhere to be found, even though they had cops shooting at it, which made me think, wait a minute, if there was a giant robot attacking my city, I wouldn't send in the guys with handguns. I'd send in the guys with tanks. And the JSD and protecting the country is pretty much what the Japanese military is there for. Or so I was like, what the hell?
Plus the paperwork
Actually,
is going
that's-
in the back way.
Actually, that's fairly realistic.
Yeah.
Here in Canada, before the military can start doing any action on a military base, there has to be a request for aid to civil power. And you could be standing there, looking out over the fence, and this happened in Halifax. Cottage Street had the riots going on. And they couldn't go out there. They couldn't help during the police strike until the request came through from the civil powers. That's because of our Constitution and the laws we follow. It's not like I'm trying to think, Thailand, or if you went to Russia, where you would have the civil militia, which is a branch of the army under the Soviet system. They just march up the guys with shovels and go, have at it.
Question there? Thoughts?
Near.
Yep, no, you.
Just a quick example to bring up. Just thoughts on this. Are you familiar with the series Ghost in the Shell?
Oh,
Yes.
No, you are.
Yes.
Okay, just what are your thoughts? I remember quite liking the portrayal of mechs in that as being. I still think they're impractical in a lot of ways, but the whole wheeled plus multi-leg design as a means of both shock absorbing, but also being able to move quickly over smooth terrain and being able to walk over rough terrain. And I just wanted your thoughts on that.
There were experiments in the late 50s, early 60s by the U.S. military to build a walking truck.
I apologize for bringing up nightmares. That was awesome timing.
I'm a 3DS.
A walking truck.
Awesome.
Great idea, looks great. There's a problem of scale. What works for an ant doesn't work for something the size of a pickup truck. And they found that you literally, on terrain where you could drive a wheeled vehicle or a tracked vehicle, this thing would sink to its belly because there's so much ground pressure. Even when they ended up, it came down and it looked like they had aero discs on the end of each leg, basically a mammal cover. But there's so much weight being applied.
Elephants are afraid to run because if they actually try to move that fast, they will break their legs.
There's potential.
Question there, Richard?
Yes, another thing that always bothered me about military conflict portrayal is how sanitary everything is. You know, the opponent vehicle is shot, it explodes, and there's no debris. A plane falls out of the sky, doesn't land on anything. The streets are artistically strewn with rubble, but it doesn't block transport.
That's an excellent point. I mean, and there's so many things that will happen in a conflict, and it's never neat and clean and simple. And even from a psychological point of view, right? I mean, you know, again, a story about a bunch of soldiers developing PTSD may not be that entertaining. It's not that action that you're looking for, but that does happen. That's realistic. That could happen.
Yeah, to expand on the psychological, I'm reading a PDF file since I can't remember who did the survey. But apparently during the Second World War, like the reason why so many shots aren't actually killing shots, you expect so many, just sometimes just to kill a handful of people. A lot of people just don't actually want to kill another person. They just fire kind of away from them, just try to get the guns and lock them just when they're off. Those people these soldiers are really are still killing machines.
No, I can guarantee that most soldiers are not stone cold killing.
I'm trying to remember the name of the author. The book is called On Killing. It was a psychological study of combat killing. And I found it was most easy to kill an opponent when there's a distance, and not only physical, but there's sensory separation. In other words, with somebody doing a bombing run. The bomber is more likely to try to kill someone, simply because there's a disconnect. They're not physically seeing their victims. And when you're sitting, then you go to tanks, you're not killing the crew in the other vehicle, you're destroying their vehicle. You don't think about the people inside. And the hardest kill is up close and personal with a bullet. And I have from a couple of different sources that the hardest thing to do isn't get into a knife fight with someone because you don't get away without getting punched.
Just for some statistics on that, again in 2008 we were in some pretty heavy combat, and of all the firefights, we had firefights that would last hours and maybe one person would get shot on both sides. Right? Most of the kills, of the kills we made, about under 5% were small arms. Right? We had small arms, rifles, machine guns, and so on. Probably about 10% were crew-served weapons, tanks. Tanks are very good stabilized guns, so they can, they can shoot out to long range. So when they were in combat, they could pick things out. But the enemy knows where the tank is, so they can stay away from it. They can stay out of its arcs very often. Most of the kills we made were there, probably about 20% with artillery, and all the rest with aircraft. Right? Basically, the guy engages. All you're trying to do is get him to shoot, so you can find where he is and drop the bomb. And that was what most of our engagements came down to. With them, it was trying to get us to engage. They can push us onto the ground and detonate the IED. So it's the same kind of thing. So it's not very heroic combat. It's basically everyone's fighting with these huge explosions, which will kill lots of people, and all the small arms are basically to push people to those locations, get them to expose themselves, or to protect yourselves. And that last fallback, you throw the rounds out, get everyone to hit the deck so you can run away. Right?
They do say that a significant number of small arm shots are made simply to interfere with his shooting, so that so that's all you're trying to do is you're shooting at him to keep him from being able to shoot properly at you. And a lot of lead going down range just to sort of interfere with to psychologically to help convince him that he's in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I just finished reading a book called The Gun by Jay Chivers. I'm hoping I remember the author's name correctly. It deals with the development of the Kalashnikov assault rifle, the AK-47, the AKM, the AK-74. But it shows goes back to the development of automatic weapons, first of all, going back to repeating weapons, the Gatling gun being the first true repeating weapon that was effective and used in combat. And going up through historical, through World War I with machine guns, and then into troop results and effects in World War II and the effect on Russian psychology, and then the development and the holes that are in the stories that have been told about the development of the Kalashnikov. But he's been given credit for it. What was a team effort? The hero of the people in the Soviet system. They produced what is probably the most effective assault rifle. It's not a battle rifle, it's an assault rifle. It doesn't have the range of a battle rifle. You can carry more ammo. And it's accurate out to unusual combat distances. That's the other thing is pistol. Length of this room. Beyond that, in a combat situation, your brain making noise.
Just getting back to the book you mentioned, On Killing, it's by Dave Grossman. Again, yeah, it's a psychological study of killing, the act of killing, if you're interested. Dave Grossman. Any other questions? Yep.
I was just wondering, is there any validity to, some people say that there's more of an emphasis on shoot to injure rather than shoot to kill, because if you injure a person on the opposing side, more manpower will be used up in order to help that injured person.
Yes. To a certain extent, yes, but again, you don't get to pick. Right? It's not like, I'm going to make this a killing shot. Again, you don't have that accuracy, you don't have that capability. Again, as mentioned, a lot of rounds are going down range just to interfere with his own shooting. So, yeah, ideally, you're completely correct. If I wound an enemy soldier, then two guys have got to pick him up, drag him back from the front line. Then I have to involve his medical system to pull him back. He's going to be in the hospital for a while, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you kill him, well, okay, there's to a certain extent they could just dig a hole right there, but there's other things that have to be happening as well. But again, you as the soldier, you don't have the choice. You're just shooting to shoot. You're shooting as per your training, center visible mass. Whether you're killing him or injuring him, you really don't really get to pick.
So long as he doesn't hurt you or your buddies.
He's always listening to orders. You're always listening to the person in charge because they're the ones supposed to have the overview look. There's always, and then they've always got orders from somebody else, so your main job is to shoot.
I know, I know one thing that isn't like a weapon is like they wouldn't send out anything to save one person in an actual war. There's other instances like that.
That one was based on a real story. Four out of 5 brothers died in war, and then it's gonna leave that mother without another son. So that was based on a true story.
In real life, though, they sent the Padre. They sent one man to get him. The Padre just walked through the German lines, said, "I'm on a mission of mercy." And the German said, "Okay, go through." He picked up the guy and brought him back. So, you know.
But of course, the movie has to be more dramatic.
I don't know, I think a chaplain walking in there and being that bold about it was pretty.
You could argue, yeah.
Depending upon the German troops that he's facing, and the officers that he was facing, there would quite possibly be that sort of agreement. Gallipoli in World War I, you had Australian, New Zealand, Newfoundland troops facing trench warfare, basically under siege, facing the Turks. And at several points, an officer would go out with the flag of truce, talk with the other officers, and they would arrange a ceasefire so they could pick up and bury the dead that were trapped in no man's, or left in no man's land after the attacks on each other. Simply because what's that area where they were, this is a nice cool spring day. Think about throwing 150 pounds of meat, in other words, one person, outside, 150 pounds of meat out in the sun today. Come back in 3 days, you're not going to be able to go on a B-50 or a Champ window. Now multiply that by a couple of thousand. So both sides were like, yeah, we got to do something about the dead, not only out of respect for them, but for the sake of our sanity, because that smells going to drive everybody.
They had a different sense of honor. You actually know, even listen now back to the Roman times, and even colonial, not colonial, but back then, they've always had a sense of honor type thing that you don't really kind of see these days. Now it's more orders, but if you had a truth, sense of truth, then everybody's honoring it, no matter how bad the enemies you are, you're going to honor it. Where you kind of don't see that.
And again, that's sort of getting back to realistic portrayal of military things in an anime. Another factor that you see a lot, of course, is the bad guy is always horribly bad, evil. He thinks of himself as evil. He's doing this because he's evil. Whereas in reality, people are people. Even the guy on the other side wearing the other uniform, most of them are there because they were told to be there. Most of them themselves are not evil. They're not bad people. They're people. And quite often they can be talked to and they can be reasoned with. They can be, and truces like that can be developed. Honor still exists. People will refuse to fight. There's instances of, in World War II, of a German soldier refusing to participate in an execution of unarmed civilians. No, I'm not going to do this. It's not right. Unfortunately, the Germans just took him and lined him up on the wall with everybody else. But he still had that sort of, I'm not going to be evil. I'm not going to be a bad guy.
Yeah, I actually have a pet peeve with a lot of anime, well, fiction in general, about how they're portrayed in combat, what they wear, etc. And I think the best way to demonstrate this is, when was the last time you saw an anime or a video game or something, someone who actually had room for their ammunition or any body armor? This is one of my biggest pet peeves. Just one, what you think of that, the old. How many video games have you seen where the characters have this awesome powered armor, or battle armor, or whatever, and absolutely no space for ammunition, or water, or food?
Unseen armor component is usually no right.
I've seen a French maid with a bulletproof umbrella and suitcase.
But is there room for food?
That was Black and Blue.
Stop at 22 or some buckshot, so that's what.
Again, yeah, and it's getting down to how realistic is the equipment that is being portrayed, and you know, perfectly accurate, physics, reality-based portrayals of military equipment. Again, is to entertain. That's the bottom line.
Another one's concerning what many people call mercenaries or find in military corporations to be. Are you actually as dodgy or crushable in real life? Basically seen as some sort of dogs of war who live out well, need to really oversee them.
The big thing there is you have to separate the definition of a mercenary and a private military company, and that's not easy to do. And there's a lot of that going on right now. There are a lot of companies that are willing to help militaries out by doing stuff for them, and a lot of militaries who, primarily for budgetary reasons, find it easier and more efficient to simply contract things out to private companies. For example, pilot training. A lot of it right now is being done by a private corporation. Rather than the military doing it itself, it hires this company. This company hires former pilots. They maintain their own aircraft. They do all the pilot training that they need to do, and they're a private military company. I just read a newspaper article. There's a company that is putting together a private navy to provide security off the coast of Somalia. Because right now there's a lot of cargo ships, well, there's always a lot of cargo ships going through that particular piece of ocean, and the Somali pirate problem has been around for quite a few years. The militaries of the world have difficulties dealing with that, and possibly because of budgets, possibly because of political will, etc. This company says we could probably make a lot of money by ramping up our own navy, ships, armed ships with crews and everything, hanging out in that particular area and keeping the Somali pirates from attacking shipping, and then charging the companies that are doing the shipping and the militaries that are doing shipping through that area a fee. Saying, okay, we'll protect your ships, here's the cost. So you're seeing a lot more private military companies doing things, and a lot more governments and militaries saying, you know, this is a good idea, it's a good deal, it's a lot cheaper for us. Now, are they mercenaries, and do they fall under the mercenaryism is against the Geneva Conventions? But it's one of those things, it's like, when do they become mercenaries? And it's not a simple issue. I studied this last year at school. So.
Blackwater.
Yes, well, they're not called that anymore.
Yes, I
they
know.
have a new name, so they're a completely different company.
To divest themselves from previous incidents.
They have a bad reputation. They may have been involved in things not 100% legal, but then again, some of the things that they are doing, like Canadian Forces contracts, they call Z now, XD, I think. They contract them for training of our close protection units. We train units, we train people to provide close protection to senior officers. And the training that these guys get is provided by a private military company that is evolved from Blackwater, which is probably one of the most notorious of the private military companies. So.
Years ago, about 10, 15 years ago, there was Executive Outcomes, which was a commercial security company in Africa. A lot of ex-South African soldiers, as well as some drawn from Zaire and Zambia. What they provided in different areas of the Gold Coast area, they were providing security to oil drilling platforms and such. Because basically the locals were having their local fishing grounds destroyed by the oil companies and such. So what they do is they go take over an oil platform, command the ransom for compensation for the destruction, the effect on their livelihoods. And the company said, this is embarrassing. We don't want them doing that to us and stopping their production. Hired this company. The company did some things that were legal, such as setting up a security for the oil rig. Other things they didn't do was illegal for the beat on the locals' liver. Now, there's a gentleman behind you in a blue shirt. He's going to wait patiently. Yes.
Oh, well, I had a question on realism and military structure. And for example, Full Metal Alchemist also, there is, yeah, it's a military government, but they have rights, you know, like corporal salute and all that. I was just wondering, how does it reflect on, maybe like real military roles and rank?
I think what you find is, and I haven't watched all of Full Metal Alchemist yet, but in the middle of it. They tend to focus on the officers, Major Armstrong, Colonel Roy, etc. Whereas in a real military, the officers are probably, well, they're the smallest group. The military rank structure is sort of like a pyramid. I had someone ask me once, a relative, an in-law, saying, okay, how come all you ever hear about coming back from Afghanistan is Private so-and-so getting killed, Corporal so-and-so getting killed. They're all you ever hear about is soldiers getting killed. You never hear about officers getting killed. And there's two primary reasons. For the most part, the guys at the pointy end doing the actual work are the corporals and privates, which exposes them to the danger. But the other thing is there's far more of them over there than there are of brigadiers, lieutenant colonels, and generals. So that sort of pyramidic structure, if you're going to write a realistic military story, you're going to be writing it about soldiers. You're not going to be writing it about the officers, because all officers ever do is sit around, drink coffee, and take credit for everything. Right? So.
This was my job, taking care of a soldier. I was in a data swarm, and I made sure and keep track, especially when there was wartime stuff, how many people we had in the whole unit wide. The brigade, because we had 5 battalions, which had 4 companies each, so I had over 3,000 people to make sure when we called alert, I knew every single person. And when you actually got the numbers, 200 of them were officers. You probably had about another 200 that were higher enlisted, and then you probably maybe had 50 warrant officers, which is kind of a branch. Everything else was sergeants and below. Everything else was on, because they're pretty much working out and working, the ones that hands on.
Any other questions?
One thing that you started approaching with the idea of, the enemy being evil all the time was sort of the nature of conflict. And the idea that whenever there's sort of large-scale wars, it can be country versus country, or there are some series like Flag over here, which explore the idea of what I think is called unequal warfare, with large organized military forces against insurgencies and guerrilla forces. So I was wondering if you had any ideas or any other ideas on series that you think portray the conflict in interesting fashion that you just enjoyed for the nature of the conflict.
Haven't watched too many anime series.
We're the military experts, we're not anime. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but again too, you could probably state, as you say yourself, big country on big country warfare is, to use probably the wrong word, passé. That hasn't really happened in quite some time. What you're finding is large-scale militaries dealing with smaller insurgencies like Afghanistan, Iraq, or what just happened in Libya, what could happen potentially in other countries that are experiencing sort of similar civil uprisings. Excuse me. Those are probably what the militaries are going to be involved in from now on. You're not probably, never say never, but the likelihood of large-scale country-on-country warfare, not very realistic. But again, makes for great stories, especially if you're setting, the setting of that story is in maybe a different time or a different place.
Just in my experience, there aren't any anime that do asymmetric warfare. Well, it's not heroic, right? Like if all the stories about your freedom fighters placing bombs on the road to blow up tanks at a distance, it doesn't make them very heroic, right? It's not like Lelouch, running out, because Lelouch would do it. A real military would crush it, right? Like he's putting too many forces out in the open. There's too much power a state can interfere against an unconventional foe, and he's flattened, right? So, in general, it's not going to make a good story. It would make a good spy thriller. It's more in that kind of thing. Like the cells trying to avoid being detected and trying to get their bombs out there. But as an actual war story, it doesn't have the necessary elements of heroism, of individualism to really make a good anime. Someone might be able to adapt it in a way, but right now, there's nothing that really, in my experience, there's nothing that covers unconventional warfare.
Watch Flag.
Historically, one of the most effective counterinsurgency campaigns waged was by the British in Malaysia.
significantly different conflict from, say, what was going on in Afghanistan or Iraq. But quite literally, there were books written about that conflict in Malaysia that are considered to be the book on how to run a counterinsurgency campaign. And interestingly enough, when you see what some countries did in certain situations and had a lot of difficulty, yeah, well, you obviously didn't read the book. You made the classic errors that are listed right there.
Actually, I just thought of another anime that does an interesting take on. It's not really asymmetric warfare is so much of a civil unrest story, but Jinro Birth Brigade. If anyone's run into that, it deals with an alternate timeline in which Japan is going through a civil unrest stage, and they have basically the beginnings of an open rebellion. And you have the whole thing where they're operating largely in the shadows. You have like the opening sequence has the rebels providing Molotov cocktails loaded with something like homemade napalm to rioters, and then basically the equivalent of military police or their militant police going after them, chasing them through the sewers and and they're heavily armed, etc. But it gets into this whole interesting, which neither side is entirely right territory. So
the other thing to remember too is, okay, this is. Panel is military realism and anime, because we're here at Anime North, we're talking about anime, we're talking about manga, we're talking about that sort of thing. I would sort of, step out the box slightly and say there's not a lot of movies, stories in general that are perfectly militarily accurate. It's not, we're not picking on the animes here. You get that endless magazine problem in feature films, and you get unrealistic physics in feature films. Not saying they're bad movies. I love Avengers. It was a great flick. Mr. Stark's armor is just cool as all get out, but yeah, you probably never would do that. But hey, it's still a good story. So, we're not picking on the enemies.
Actually, it's not an anime film. One of the most bluntly accurate war films that I've seen is the movie from Australia called The Odd Angry Shot. It's roughly an hour and a half in total, including all the artillery exchanges and everything else. All the combat is probably less than 4 minutes.
As a matter of fact, it's I've seen it, and I would agree. It's a great movie, and it's one of the few movies that shows a lot of the boring day-to-day, sitting in the back lines, waiting for something to happen, sort of dull minutia that aren't really exciting. So highly recommended. And again, it's not an anime; it's a live-action movie. It's a little on the old side. It's about the Australian SAS in Vietnam. There were a few of them there, not many. And again, highly, probably one of the more realistic movies that you've ever seen. The whole movie, Captain America?
Not like the super soldier.
Yeah, not the super soldier program and all that, the shield, and all sorts of things. Yeah. Not too bad overall. I mean, it's definitely a science fiction movie. Right? I just sort of running it through my mind, and all I keep seeing is things that no, not realistic, fun, entertaining, but. There are some little things. I think one of the key factors is, and someone on the panel here mentioned it, right? The soldier on either side, the soldier in the trench, is primarily there, maybe to a certain extent, protecting himself, yes, but really what they find is soldiers fight for their buddies. They don't fight for higher level morals, they don't fight for political gains, they don't fight for, a lot of things. To a certain extent, there's the doing what you're told, but for the most part, it's not letting your buddies down. You have that team effort, and that's again another thing that you don't see very realistically, because animes tend to be about an individual. That one individual is the hero, and of course we're going to follow him, and he does everything. Whereas in the real military, it's always a team effort. It's a group, it's a team, and you're fighting for your buddies. You don't want to let your buddies down. You don't want your buddies to think of you as not pulling your own weight, and you don't want anything bad to happen to your buddies, and that's what you're doing. And they've gone back to, and this has happened throughout various conflicts. They've gone back to people and asked, what were you thinking about? What was your big motivation? It's like, I gotta help my buddies. I can't let them down. So there's a little bit of that in Captain America, not necessarily lots, but there is that. One of the things that struck me as relatively important.
How accurate do you think enemy activates?
We're talking the movie with Jude Law. They took a lot of liberties with that compared to the actual historical record. They did not have a standoff duel in the middle of the railroad yard at the end. Nor did he actually was already, he was sent in already knowing to be a superior shot. He went into selling that. The battle conditions for the buildings, yes, they were that way. Combination of the CD exchange, repeatedly repossessed, taken by one side, retaken by the other. Both sides were shelling it. The Germans initially, when it became that Stalingrad, shelled crap out. Damage they did, they couldn't get tanks to the streets. So it was infantry combat. When you destroy a building, you get all sorts of nooks and crannies that the person can crawl into and uses weapons. And it turned into what the Germans call Rattenkrieg, War of the Rats. There would be conflict. There would be Russian positions above ground. The Germans would be in the sewers underneath, up to 100 meters behind them. You know, at an intersection, they're fighting the Russians for control of that intersection with a couple of sewer tunnels. And then a week later, the situation would change. The Germans were holding the above ground in some of the buildings, and the Russians had that section of sewer. Go back and forth.
Yeah, sort of as a caveat to that, and you see a lot of films these days, you know, based on actual events. And yes, maybe. And writers tend to take, you know, again, not letting facts or reality get in the way of a good story. And my favorite sort of counterpoint to that is Amityville Horror, based on actual events. Seriously, it was based on actual events. You really got to stretch it a little bit, and a lot of those actual events occurred only in one person's mind. But so just because something's based on actual events doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be that much more realistic than something that's completely made up.
Definitely do your research. Do like, oh, that sounds interesting, or I want to know more about it. Definitely do your research. Definitely look more historical and see what it's based after and get names and stuff, because then you get your answer.
But I keep coming back to the fact that even if it's not realistic, even if it's inaccurate, you know, if you can step back and, I mean, for some people it's more difficult than others, you know, just to say, okay, I'm going to ignore reality here, just enjoy the show. You know, like I said, I enjoy the hell out of Avengers. Was it realistic? Probably not, but who cares? It's an awesome movie.
There's a few stories I've heard of where when they actually went and made movies or books or whatever of the actual story, they toned down the events simply because what actually happened was implausible, like some person might have taken, and in what people would consider an unrealistic amount of bullets and still.
Yeah, that does happen quite often in stories where, well, this is what actually happened, but if we actually put that on screen, people will think it was dumb. That would never happen. You know, reality is stranger than fiction sometimes. So, you know, there's you know, if you did the Venn diagram of what could actually happen and what is shown on screen and what actually did happen, you know, there's some things that they're just, you know, when they're making the movie and they're reading about it and go, yeah, no one's going to believe that actually happened. So we'll do this instead, which never happened, but makes for a cooler story.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what Band of Brothers actually happened. I mean, the whole story behind it that is based on a true story. It's awesome. Like, very interesting. And I usually don't watch a lot of war movies, but that one really caught me. You know, Band of Brothers. I loved it. The whole message actually, I really loved. You know, the whole thing. But to actually really know what really happened, because you know you can't take what was really made, like what actually happened. And I just really loved it.
If you go to the website crack.com, they every now and then they have some interesting stories, and they have some based on that, you know, cool things that you never would have believed really happened, and do a little bit of research there.
We are at 11:56. Yeah.
Last question.
One thing in areas of shows that I've seen that isn't realistic is, I'm not sure if it's just military, it's been kind of pretty stupid. Like bulletproof vest or whatever that like block every single kind of bullet ever. It's like
is there are certain bulletproof technologies, but again, it depends. What bullet, right? I mean, you know, this vest is bulletproof. Okay, just let me pick the right bullet and I'll put it through that vest. A lot of the armor protection that you see soldiers wearing are protection from what are called secondary fragments, from the little bits of shrapnel, the little bits of rocks that are always flying around that will do serious injuries, and that's all that's going to protect, right? And there's always a nook and a cranny, and again, what I talked about earlier, where I put my round is a lot more important than what sort of round it is. And there's never quite as, it's never as perfectly bulletproof as they show you in the movies. There's no such thing as that perfect.
And in realism, in Iraq, Americans kept upgrading the amount of protection of the body armor their personnel were wearing, because of the IEDs becoming more and more, the improvised explosive devices becoming more and more effective. That at the point, some of the troops were saying, I can't wear this anymore. What do you mean? I had kids throwing rocks at me. I can't shoot them, but they're really pissing me off, so I tried to pick up a rock. Guy reached over to pick up a rock. His body armor weighed so much he fell over and he was turbulent. He had to have two of his buddies help him stand back up. The weight of the kit he had with him, the body armor itself, and just the physical location on his body. He was so overbalanced, he couldn't get himself back up.
I think we're going to have to call it there. Sorry. I hope you all enjoyed it.